Let me show you how you can make your own shelf-stable jambalaya mix at home for 1/4 of the cost of the brand name mix. One of my favorite go-to meal ideas for nights when I don't feel like doing much cooking is jambalaya mix. And if you're not a big fan of shrimp, like me, it's also really cheap. Saturnines is my favorite, but to be honest, any brand of jambalaya mix will do. The thing is, a box of jambalaya mix can run about $2 to $3, depending on where you shop. I've seen some specialty brands run as high as $7 a box. And if you already have plenty of rice and spices in your pantry, why pay 3 times as much? This is how you put it together to make 3 batches of homemade jambalaya mix. Add 3 cups of white rice to a bowl. Then add 7 tablespoons of dried chopped green onion. Alternatively, you can use 3 tablespoons of dried minced onion and 1 tablespoon of dried chives. Next, add 3 tablespoons of dried parsley. Then add 4 teaspoons of beef bullion granules. I'm using 4 leftover beef ramen soup packets because we don't use them in the actual ramen when we eat it. Next, add 2 tablespoons of dried celery leaves. I don't have any of those on hand, but I do have dehydrated chopped celery, so I'm going to add those to taste, about half a cup. Next, add 1/2 to 1 whole teaspoon of garlic powder. Then 2 teaspoons of Italian herb seasonings and a tablespoonful of Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning. If you want a bit more heat, add 1/2 to 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper. Next comes my secret ingredient for adding a lot of deep, rich flavor to the mix, my homemade dried tomato powder. This makes it more of a Cajun, New Orleans style jambalaya rather than a Creole style, and you won't have to add tomato sauce when you cook it. My tomato powder is basically a waste product of canning. I remove the skins from the tomatoes before making sauce with them. Then I dry them in the dehydrator and grind them into a powder to season foods. Since it's basically free, I'm not going to be shy with it. I'm using 6 heaping tablespoons in this batch of mix. I'd guess it's about half a cup. Next, I add about half a cup of dehydrated bell pepper strips. Then mix well. Mix very well. If your ingredients are kind of chunky, like mine are, you'll probably have to continue to mix them while you're dividing the batch up. I'm separating mine into 3 separate pint jars. As you can see, I'm trying to equally divide up the chunky bits like the celery and pepper. That way each jar has about the same amount. Same with the spices. Check the color to ensure that the spices are equally divided. Now that the mix is equally divided, I'm going to use this canning jar vacuum sealer the manufacturer sent me to check it out. This will remove all the air from inside the jar and seal the canning lid so that it should remain fresh for up to 3 years. Normally, the shelf life for rice mix like this is about 1 to 2 years. These are wide mouth jars, so with this vacuum sealer model, I had to take the adapter off that lets you use it with smaller lids. First thing you do is wipe the inside of the threaded band on your jar. The device is automatic and the sealer will stop as soon as the jar is sealed and all the air is removed. You can see on this jar that the lid is indented slightly from the vacuum. Then you can add the screw-on lids if you like, and they'll be fresh and ready to use for many, many months. Not that it's going to last on your shelf that long. We're going to cook up our first batch tonight. First, I'll take a saucepan and add a little bit of olive oil. I like to save my high-quality virgin olive oil for fresh use, so I'm going to use a lower grade for cooking. I'm on a real tight budget right now, so I'm just going to use a 1 pound package of smoked sausage. I'll cut it into discs and then brown it well in the saucepan. For the best flavor, you really need to be patient. Get some caramelization on the sausages. Developing the patience to produce a Maillard reaction on your meat is one way to help a cheap, quick meal taste like something far more involved. The crispy crust also adds some texture to what is basically just a one-pot meal. I cooked these sausages low and slow for a few minutes just to heat them through. Then I cranked up the heat to develop a crust. Next, you want to add your rice mix to the pan. You want to coat all the grains of rice with a little of the cooking oil and meat juices. This produces a flakier rice that doesn't get all sticky when it's cooked. Sauté the rice in the pan for about a minute, scraping the bottom of the pan to prevent scorching. Next, add 2½ cups of hot water. I'm using water I heated with an electric kettle. Then stir well, scraping the bottom of the pan to deglaze it, and integrate all those crunchy bits into the dish. Bring it up to a rolling boil and boil for at least 1 minute. This will help rehydrate the dried vegetables. Keep stirring to ensure that everything is well mixed. Then cover the pan with a tight lid and bring the temperature down to a simmer. Cook on simmer for 20 minutes. You can occasionally check the pot to make sure that the water hasn't all been absorbed and that there's no burning on the bottom. Don't be afraid to add a little more water during cooking if you have to. Remove from the heat after 20 minutes and let it rest with the lid on for about 5 minutes. Next, you can dish it out and serve it. As of this recording, a 12-ounce box of Zatarain's mix at Walmart costs $2.64. That's not much, but a 5-pound bag of rice is $3.34, and you'll get nearly 7 batches of jambalaya mix out of it. So a 12-ounce batch of mix costs you about 50 cents worth of white rice from Walmart. Let's estimate a whole 25 cents per batch for the seasonings. And if you grow and dehydrate some of your own vegetables like I do, you can figure in the cost, or you can just consider them free. So making your own mix at home will give you a better product for about 75 cents.